Hey everybody! So I want to take a few minutes to explain what you need to do to complete week 4 assignment 1 on fragments and run-ons. First of all, um, if you have not gone through the material in the week 4 module, you will want to do so before you attempt these assignments. Unless grammar and mechanics is your thing and you're quite familiar with all the rules and whatnot, then, you might be able to complete these assignments this week with no problem. But I think most of us, we need a bit of a refresher. So you definitely want to go back through the week 4 module and just at least review the handouts, even if you don't watch every single video. Because the handouts provide an explanation as well as examples that correspond to the type of items that you're going to be asked to work on in the homework assignments. So, what you're being asked to do here in week 4 assignment 1, there are examples of these problems in the handouts in week 4. All right. So at least review the handouts. If there's any particular lesson that is a little confusing or you're unsure of, go ahead and watch the video that goes along with it. And if you're still not certain, reach out to me, right? But if you feel like you're ready to complete this assignment, we're going to be working on sentence fragments and run-ons and comma splices. You're going to be doing this as a text submission. So you're going to type your responses in the box. That means you're going to need to copy and paste the assignment into the text box and then mark your answers. It would be best if you could copy and paste the whole thing instead of just numbering or just typing out your answers. It's a little easier for me to see exactly what you were doing if you have copied and pasted the whole thing. Okay? So we have 2 parts to this assignment. Part 1 is on sentence fragments. You're going to see in part 1 that there are 3 groups of sentences. So like 3 small paragraphs. In each one, there is 1 sentence fragment. Your job is to identify the sentence fragment by underlining it or highlighting it, that's fine. And then your second job is to correct it. There is an example in a box there under the instructions for part 1. You'll see example. An electric eel can produce a shock of over 600 volts, more than enough power to kill a full-grown human. The eel uses this power as radar to find live food. Step 1 says to underline or highlight the sentence fragment, just as I've done above in that example. You can see highlighted in yellow, more than enough power to kill a full-grown human. That is the sentence fragment. It is not a complete sentence. Step 2 is to make the correction, and I've shown you there how to correct it. An electric eel can produce a shock of over 600 volts, comma, more than enough power to kill a full-grown human. The eel uses this power as radar to find live food. Okay, so step 1, identify the fragment by either underlining or highlighting it. Step 2, fix it. Step 2 is not going to require a lot of work or a lot of adding things or moving things around. They're pretty simple fixes. But you have to make sure that you have identified the fragment correctly so that you are then making the correct fix as well. Okay? And again, there are 3 of those, 3 sets. And again, each set has 1 fragment. That's it, just 1. There is nothing else wrong with those 3 sets. Everything else is perfectly fine. The only problem is there is a fragment that you need to identify and fix. That's it. Right? Okay. Part 2 is on run-on sentences and comma splices. This lesson in particular, I highly suggest going back and reviewing the handout and watching the video if you haven't already done so. Run-on sentences, most people understand them pretty well. Comma splices, a lot of students haven't heard of before. It's a special type of run-on sentence, but a comma splice is the #1 error in all of student writing. Everyone makes this error practically, and hardly anyone realizes that it's a problem. Hardly anyone realizes that it is an error. So make sure that you've reviewed that lesson, okay? What you're going to do for this part of the assignment is you're going to see a list of sentences. There are 7, and each of those 7 contains either a standard run-on sentence or a comma splice, one or the other. Your job is to find it and fix it. And I've given you an example here as well. Actually, 2 examples. Because the first example I've given is a standard run-on sentence. Fear can prevent a person from acting. Hate, on the other hand, will often cause action. So to fix that, you have to figure out, okay, where does the first complete sentence end and where does the second complete sentence begin? That's the point where the error has occurred. So in this case, the first complete sentence was supposed to say, fear can prevent a person from acting. The second sentence is, hate, on the other hand, will often cause action. So there's no punctuation there between acting and hate, which means it's a standard run-on sentence. How do we fix it? In the lesson, if you go back and review it, I go over 4 different ways that you can fix a run-on sentence or a comma splice. So in this case, I've chosen to use a semicolon, and you can see it there in the correction. Fear can prevent a person from acting, semicolon. Hate, on the other hand, will often cause action. Right? The second example is an example of a comma splice, which again is still a run-on sentence. We just give it a special name because it's such a common error that it kind of has taken on a subcategory of its own. Again, a comma splice is when we have 2 complete sentences and we try to separate them by simply putting in a comma. But a comma is not strong enough to do that. Therefore, it's still a run-on. We call it a comma splice because we've just tried to splice them together with a comma. And as much as you might see that happen in writing, it's actually an error. It's not correct. So in this case, our original sentences said, I got a speeding ticket last week, comma, the cost of my insurance will probably go up. That comma is there where the 2 sentences connect, but the comma is not strong enough. So there are several ways we can fix it, and in the correction you can see the way I chose to fix it. I got a speeding ticket last week, comma, so the cost of my insurance will probably go up. Okay? So there in that example box, I've given you an example of a traditional run-on sentence and how to fix it, as well as a comma splice and how to fix it. The 7 sentences that are listed below, each one of them is either a standard run-on sentence or a comma splice, right? The main thing you have to remember is when you figure out where the 2 sentences connect, don't put a comma by itself, because then it becomes a comma splice and it's still wrong. So you have to make sure that if it's a traditional run-on sentence, that you're fixing it the right way. And if it's a comma splice, you have to make sure you understand why it's a comma splice. What is wrong with that sentence? It's because there's a comma by itself being used, and that's not strong enough. So you'll go through each one. Each one has a run-on or a comma splice. Your job is to fix it, right? Do not simply create 2 separate sentences each time. Don't just put a period and then capitalize the first letter of the first word of the second sentence. Sometimes that's an okay way to fix these problems. But if you do that every time, you're going to end up with a bunch of short, choppy sentences, and then your writing's not going to sound very professional or academic. So work on using some of the other methods that are explained in the handout under the Run-On Sentences and Comma Splices lesson in week 4. Okay? Do your best, and really do your best, because again, these are very common errors in writing, the fragments and the run-ons and comma splices, and I'm going to be looking closely for them when I grade your formal writing assignments that you'll be working on here in the next couple weeks. So if you can get a good grasp of these lessons now and work through them in the assignments, the better off you'll be when it comes time to work on those paragraphs, right? And if you have any questions or run into any problems, let me know. Otherwise, do your best, and I'll be giving you feedback on it.